Everybody, thanks for watching. So now, who are the Hebrew Israelites? If you watch my channel, I have a lot of videos dealing with the Hebrew Israelite teachings and their beliefs, and basically refuting all the information they have put out and have been putting out over the years to get people to really understand what the truth is. If you are a person who does not read the Bible or know real history, especially if you're black, it's going to be very easy to fall victim to what they're teaching. And, who are they? Really what they are no different from your pastor, your preacher, or anybody else that's pushing the Bible, because that's exactly what they're pushing is the Bible, just on a different, situation, you might as well say. So no different from Catholics, no different from Christians. They're pushing the same book. And we can stick with the whole thing about, Old Testament, New Testament, or what have you. At the end of the day, it's the same type of person getting you to pray to an invisible God that is not doing shit for you or anything to help you in your life and change your life, and you know that. So you have these people who are basically trying to get you to let go of where you come from and your history, to hate Africa, to hate African people, and to just forget about the truth about your history. Now, you'll hear so many of the disses, the jokes, the derogatory stuff that they say. Where do you come from? What part of Africa are you from? If you're from Africa, you're not from Africa. You're from America. You're from Israel. You're a Jew, a Hebrew, or what have you. And everything that they say in all the ways that they put it, they can never give you any proof of any of this stuff. And that's what you gotta come away with, instead of listening to their story as far as how it seemed to fit with the Bible. When you understand history and what took place, that part you can explain. That part you can look at very clearly, as I'm about to explain, and see exactly what's going on. And you'll see how everything else begins to fold. So, again, you'll have Hebrews talk about you are not from Africa. You are from the tribe of Judah. You are a, Shemitic, all kinds of stuff like that. And it really goes back to the King James Version and looking at Deuteronomy 28, which, of course, you know about if you're talking to Hebrews, and understanding what Deuteronomy 28 is talking about and how I broke it down and explained. Yes, Deuteronomy 28 is 100% talking about African slaves, black people in America as slaves. And the whole thing is one, getting people to understand that even though the Bible is talking about us, slaves and slavery and everything like that, that it is not what you think it is. It is not the case where they want you to believe that Moses wrote this over 2,000 years ago, and it was a prophecy of what would happen to us. So when you're reading it in the Bible and us having that whole notion and mindset that the Bible was over 2,000 years old, that it's very old, it's ancient, and this stuff was written before slavery, and that aspect is very easy to get people who don't know history to fall for this doctrine, especially when everything is talking about in Deuteronomy 28 is really, it just can't get around the fact that it's talking about us as far as slavery. But the reality is the King James Version, which is where you're going to find this at, was written between 1604, 1611. And slavery was already going on. And this is what you got to really get into your mind. I put these videos out to really help people understand the truth. It's not so much about trying to bash a person's belief and religion. It's about truth, plain and simple. And that's what we need to know, because we have a better, more rich history than, slavery and this Bible that was given to us. So just because they're giving you a doctrine that is anti, white people, anti-European, they are really getting you to basically fall victim to the same book that Europeans gave us. And you have to remember that. So when you understand that and understand that, yes, this is a European book. It was given to us by white men, not by a black man named King James, because he got it from the same people that the Romans got it from, which is the Greeks. And when you understand history, you can see how, all this stuff starts to fit. So Deuteronomy 28:68 or Deuteronomy 28 period, talking about slavery, again, was written during the time of slavery. Remember, King James, when you understand the history, basically gave us his version of the Bible, which is why it's called the King James Version. It's just that simple. Meaning, if it's a version, it's separate from the earlier Bibles. So it's a different version. So it's not like the originals, and you have to understand that. So in that case, you see where Deuteronomy 28 can be easily changed to fit exactly what they wanted to say, which is to elaborate on slavery. Now, I prove this when you look at my other videos, and you can go look for yourself. When you look at the older manuscripts, Deuteronomy 28, I gave the example of Deuteronomy 28:68, where it's talking about going to Egypt on ships. When you look at the older manuscripts, it does not say the same. It is different. It's not talking about going back to Egypt on ships or slaves or anything. The verse is talking about children, and you'll find that Deuteronomy 28 originally is not talking about us at all. That was changed and put in there by King James because he gave us his version. So that kills the whole nonsense that the Bible is a prophecy, and Deuteronomy 28 is a prophecy about what would happen to African people, to black people, as far as transatlantic slave trade. What was going on was already going on when he wrote the book. That's something you need to understand. Now, as far as taking the book back to African people having their hands in the creation of the Bible, nobody can give you proof of that. Plain and simple. And when you understand history and what took place, you take it back. If you want to go to the official explanation of where we get our Torah or the beginning of our Bible from, that goes back to LXX. And hopefully you're taking notes, because the stuff you can look up, they're not going to give you any of this stuff that they're talking about to look up and prove. LXX, the Letters of Orestes, is talking about the creation of the Septuagint by Ptolemy II Philadelphus, where he basically got 6 Hebrew elders, each from the 12 tribes of Israel. So 6 elders from each of the 12 tribes, which, I mean, how did he find them? And how did they find them around that time? So the Septuagint means 70, even though it was 72. And supposedly the letters is talking about these Hebrew elders coming to Alexandria, Egypt, to do a translation of the Hebrew law from Hebrew to Greek. So what's basically taking place is they are saying that the Hebrews brought with them the Tanakh, the Torah, and they brought it with them to Egypt, or they had it memorized and it came to Egypt, and they basically translated it into Greek so that Ptolemy II Philadelphus can have a copy. And the letters goes on about how much gold and was given to the Jews, and how many Jews were set free, and how they made a law that if any of the Greeks don't set their Jewish slaves free, they will themselves become slaves, all kinds of crap like that that nobody can prove. And it sounds far-fetched when you understand real history. Now, the reason why that cannot be true is because the actions of the Greeks later on that we can prove. So, why would you free these people, and why would you give them gold and everything like that, knowing that you were trying to instill Hellenization on these people later on? So to have them free and grow in numbers to oppose you will be stupid when you know what your plan is. So in that aspect, we can look and see, one, a lot of people is going to tell you, that the Bible goes back to African people and everything like that. No, it goes back to the Greeks. The reason why the Hebrews need for King James to be black is because they know when you do the research, it goes back to the Greeks. So they want to say that King James was black, and his version that he gave us is the real version that we should follow. And everything else before that is null and void. When you pay attention, what King James and the scholars use to create the King James Version all comes from the Greek Septuagint. So you have Textus Rescriptus, you have the Masoretic text, you have the codices, you have Vetus Latina or Latin Vulgate or what have you. All these books, any biblical book before the King James Version cannot exist if not for the Septuagint Greek. So in other words, any Bible that you can name would not be in existence if it wasn't for first the Greek version, and that is including your Ethiopian Bible. So again, If you're not understanding history, you're not going to know what took place as far as that aspect as well. So you'll have some Christians, you'll have some Hebrews, not many Hebrews, but a lot of people will go to the Abagarama book, Ethiopian Bible, written by Abagarama, and call it the oldest Bible ever, when no, that's not the case. So you have the Abagarama monastery in Ethiopia, where you had supposedly Abagarama, a Byzantine royal, a white man, coming there, basically supposedly writing this large work in a day, I believe. And when you pay attention to it, I mean, it's just plain to see what's going on. The illustrations. What it is the oldest illustrated Bible. So it's very well illustrated. It is not the oldest. That is up for debate against the Codex Vaticanus and Codex Sinaiticus as far as the oldest, which we know the Septuagint would be the oldest, but we don't have a complete version. And you have the Dead Sea Scrolls, which you can also throw into that debate. The Dead Sea Scrolls do not predate the Septuagint, Greek, by the way. So, again, when you start putting the stuff together and understanding real history and what took place, you can understand, one, where the Hebrews are confused and where they are trying to deceive you. And understanding real history and what took place is, that's the only way you're going to be able to, see through what they're saying. One, they're not going to be able to give you definitively black people creating that book. Again, which is why they need King James to be black. They're not going to be able to give you any kind of proof as far as the true history, the real history of the Hebrew people and these Jews. They do not predate the 4th century BCE, which coincidentally goes right along with when the Greeks conquered Egypt. Plain and simple. This is how Ptolemy II Philadelphus was in Kemet, in Alexandria, to get them to come there to basically do this translation, because they took over Kemet and he proclaimed himself, a ruler. You also have to understand that Israel was once Egyptian territory. It was ruled by the Egyptians. So when the Persians took over, it was still Egyptians there. When the Greeks took over from the Persians, it was still Egyptians there, Egyptians being black, African. So they would not follow. When the Greeks finally took over and conquered, they would not follow the Greek doctrine and what the Greeks was trying to instill within them. So what they did was create Judaism. And again, if you watch my videos, you heard this already before. Now, I talked about how, one, you buy Dr. Joseph Yehuda's book, Hebrew is Greek, where he proves 100% without a doubt that the Greeks created the Hebrew language as well as the Arabic language. And it's proven. There's no way around. He proves it clear as day. Nobody challenges his work. It's the reason why the book costs so much, because they don't want so many people understanding that. But it's not hard to figure out. So it's not a coincidence we have the Greeks conquering Egypt, conquering Israel, which was ruled by the Egyptians, which black people was there. And then we get this doctrine, this religion of Hebrews, Judaism, around this time, where you had them basically force this doctrine onto the black Egyptians that was there, or the black Africans that was there in Israel during that time, to spread this doctrine. So when you get into Josephus talking about the Jewish war and the Jews basically, trying to go into Rome and fight for that land back, Rome as well was ruled by black people, African people, and it was taken over by the barbarians, which is the Romans. And this is where they give you the so-called fall of Rome, which you have to ask yourself, how did Rome fall when the papacy was still around? How did the barbarians conquer the Romans when they left the papacy intact, when they left the rulership of the Romans intact? Why aren't the barbarians ruling now? Because they are the barbarians. And, the people who are in control are the people who are controlling history. So they put things in any way they want to. What we have on our side is actual facts and proof, and people who lived during that time who wrote about this stuff. So the truth is out there in books. And if you're not reading, you're never going to find it. So the reason why it seems as if, we can trace back the Hebrews so long is because we can. They really existed up until, we get to the 1st century BCE. That's it. All you have to do is look at the Diadochi War, the whole war with the Jews, as I talked about in Ancient History Part 2, and understand that you have this proven history, this long period of time where you have the wars of the Greeks fighting against each other for control of our land, Egypt and basically what we call the so-called Middle East or what have you, and other parts of Greece and everything like that. You had this large war that was taking place for hundreds of years, the War of the Diadochi, which Diadochi meaning the successors of Alexander the so-called Great, where they was fighting for hundreds of years. So during this time where they're fighting is during the same time where you supposedly supposed to have the Hebrews going around and conquering everything. Amalekites and the Jebusites and the Girgashites and the Perizzites and all that stuff. So what they have done, as I talked about in those videos, was basically take their own experience, their own wars that they went into, and try to, mix the story up to try to interject Jews, the Hebrews, into existence, which you only find that in the Bible. You won't find no story or real proven history about these wars of the Jews outside the Bible. What you will find is the actual wars of the Greeks, the ones who created the Hebrews. So it's there, and it's one of the reasons why, when you get into the Hebrew is Greek book, Dr. Joseph Yehuda is laying that down, and he goes in real deep about what took place. And then you got to understand, one, how they already outrightly, the Greeks, give credit to their language coming from the Phoenicians, and we know the Phoenicians was the Egyptians. So that Phoenicia comes from the Greek word phonikis, which means purple people, dealing again with the shell that emits this purple dye. So when you see so many historians and people talking about the Phoenicians and the Phoenician Canaanites and everything like that, understand that the Phoenician territory, that land, was a trade port. It was part of Egyptian territory, and it's where a lot of people came to trade with it. It's part of the Egyptian Empire, even though it's right near, not too far from Israel. But that whole stretch of land, again, conquered, taken over by the Greeks. And again, when you start to go back and pay attention to what was going on around that time, none of it, not in one place where you find a mention of a Hebrew or a Jew as far as doing anything except for in that book. And this is what you have to understand. You won't find any bodies. You won't find any civilizations, any monuments or anything to any Jewish ruler or what have you during this time. They won't give you an explanation for that. Plain and simple. So these are the things you have to take into account and the questions you got to ask yourself if you're trying to get into this Hebrew Israelite doctrine. You need to know the truth. You need to know what took place in real history. And when you look and you be real with yourself and not try to just want to be a part of something that's anti, white folks and something that's just, different from what you have been taught as far as the Bible or the Quran, Torah, what have you, organized religion, you need to know the history. You need to know the truth and know what you're following before you jump into it and understand that this stuff is anti-Africa, it's anti-you. So no, we are not cursed people walking around this planet cursed by God because we broke some damn covenant that none of these Hebrews or anybody can prove actually ever took place. It's stupid, it's ludicrous. The doctrine only fits the oppression of European people. You walking around believing that you cursing, that all the ills and bad things that's happening to black folks is because we disobey God, when you can look around and see that there are successful black people everywhere. How come they are not cursed? And they will have you believe that, they following Satan and Satan is giving them some kind of money or something like that. Like, come on, wake up. It's bullshit. And the doctrine really appeals to people because we see the hatred that we have for one another as far as black and white people and as far as what's going on, as how we can see them in power. Now, why would you want to then follow a book that's telling you that God put these people in power to rule over you, but yet you want to follow this doctrine? I mean, how does that register? Of course, it's a trap. It's a setup.